much fun in escrow. In fact, when we get to prelims, we're gonna talk about a deal that Tracy has right now. It's been, what, 3 months? 4 months, almost? Going on this is our 4th month, I think?
I think it's
3 months?
3.
Okay, 3 months, okay. So,
Good times.
You're like, oh, that's true.
a lot of what we go over here really doesn't help you until you're in escrow. Like, I can tell you about it, but once you're in escrow, I think it's a lot more, it's a lot easier to understand. So those of you who have been in escrow, we could teach a class on escrow, but until you're actually doing something with a buyer and seller, it's kind of hard to grasp what we're saying to you, and that's understandable. So whenever you get an escrow, you just call us or email us. We're always there for your answers, your questions, or anything else. And we've always told Craig's team, if you have a deal going sideways with someone else and you are looking for more advice on it, you can always call us too, because we'll talk to you about whatever else you have going on, and maybe if someone's not helping you at a different title company, we can kind of give you the questions to ask or who to talk to there and go from there. So we're always here for you guys, no matter where your deal is at, because we know you can't direct everything. We like you to direct everything. We know you can't direct everything, and that's understandable, but we're here to work for you, with you on that. So when you open escrow, we send out a preliminary title report to everybody. It goes in your opening package. It's escrow instructions, a prelim, and your commission order, okay? The title report, a lot of people don't look at their title report because they don't understand it, or they think there's nothing to worry about on it. But always look at your title report. Call us if you want to go through the numbers individually with us. We'll go over them with you, your buyer or your seller, okay? On Las Vegas Street, 111 Las Vegas Street, this is a free and clear title report, and the way that we'll look at it is, you go to page 1, Stan's seller is an unmarried man. If you went to the listing appointment and his wife is sitting next to him, you would need to remember that and let us know that he's married, because Nevada's a community property state. Spouses need to sign a deed at closing. Okay, so even though he acquired title as unmarried, wife is there now, he obviously got married during the time that he owned the property. If he mentions to you that his wife is in Thailand, she still needs to sign a deed,
Wow, okay.
okay?
And it happens,
All
where
the
they
time.
get estranged and they don't do correct divorces, or the divorce
They don't do
doesn't say,
divorces?
yeah, they don't
Or
do it at
people,
all.
they've been apart for a decade, so it's like, but
And you-
that's still legally
And you
your
become
spouse.
a private investigator, yeah.
Correct, and then they say, why, I can't reach them. And then we come back and say, well, then you can't sell the property, and 2 days later, they know exactly where she's at, where she's living, and what her address is. It happens way more than you guys would ever imagine it happens.
They kinda wanna get it done and not let the wife or the spouse know.
Right, because they could be due money, which is the majority of the time, they're due proceeds from the sale, like they were supposed to split the proceeds through the divorce decree. And they figure if they sell it and don't tell anyone, they keep the money. It's great. Okay, so your vesting is always gonna be on your second page. Your second page will also, when they're vesting, it'll tell you if they're in a trust. If they're in a trust, we need their trust agreement. If they're in an LLC or corporation, we need the entity docs for the corporation or the LLC. Okay, so however they hold title, there's usually something else that goes along with it.
Okay, so real quick, cause I know some of you guys are kinda contemplating that. When you get the prelim, check to see married, unmarried.
Or same seller.
Yep, yeah.
That your correct seller is on title.
Which we do that, when we take listings or when we work with buyers, we do check TaxStar,
Perfect.
just no matter what, because we have to make sure. However, this is your job. Pull that prelim, have a look, make sure that it's all there, give Kathy a call, and then, if they are vested in an LLC or a trust, there's going to be more documentation that's needed. You don't need to necessarily be the person that says, oh, you need, your LLC docs and you need to get this. You just say, hey, I need to get you in touch with escrow
Correct.
so they can tell you what you need to get them.
And
So
what
where
we're-
would that be? Sorry.
Right here, right on page 2.
Under Schedule A at the bottom.
Okay,
So page 2 where it says Stan Seller,
Yeah.
it might say Keller Williams LLC.
okay. So
Instead.
if it is an LLC, it needs what
We need
document?
the operating agreement and the articles of organization. And what we'll do is we will give you a list of the items that we need. It depends on the agent if they wanna contact the buyer or the seller directly, or we're happy to contact the seller directly also and let them know what we need. And just so you guys know, the reason for that is there are some entities that people think that they're the signer, but what the documents read, they're not technically they're not the authorized signer. But maybe they've gotten away with it for years, but not on a sell transaction. Maybe it's banking or maybe it's something else. And John thinks he's a signer, but Stan is truly the signer. the operating agreement sets out who the actual signer is.
Yeah, members versus managers, like there's all these things where people set up corporations and because they don't actually do anything of
With-
legitimacy,
right, with it,
there's no issues. But as soon as insurance companies and new buyers and new sellers are involved in the transactions, they wanna make sure you're the right seller, that's the right document, and you have the power to do that. Because a manager has a different power than a member. So we have to make sure that articles of incorporation list everybody who is responsible, because you may have to have multiple signers. It may, Stan may be.
There might be 3 signers, but one guy is the one that usually signs, but to sign a deed to transfer title, all 3 of them do, or they need to give us a consent where 3 of them sign that one person can sign.
Yep.
And
So
we
this-
will work out all those documents, but we just need to know who's who and who our players are really is what it comes down to.
So as an agent, before we move on, as an agent, when the prelim title report comes in, that is a red light for you. You say stop, grab prelim, go to Craig, call escrow, whatever you need to do and say, okay, I remember Kathy telling me that this is my responsibility, what do I need to know? And as long as you remember that,
We can
You're gonna
guide
be
you.
fine.
yeah,
And
You'll
we
be
don't
can
try
guide
to
you from there.
over-explain the
You'll be
rest of
fine.
it, cause then you're gonna be the source of
Correct,
information.
correct.
That's your specialty. If you don't wanna
Absolutely.
say the
you're
wrong
connected.
thing.
Yep.
What was the name, you said the operating agreement, what was the second document?
Articles of organization.
Articles of organization.
Okay.
Okay. Then on page 3, that's your legal description of the property. Just the builder's lot and block number.
So we had a situation where you actually represented me, with, Dennis Connors
On silver.
on Silver, where there was actually 2 parcel numbers.
Whoa.
Unbeknownst to me, unbeknownst to the seller, I believe.
Yeah, how they, yeah, right.
And
How
Sean,
they had it listed, yeah.
Sean, smart enough as he is, was like, no, wait a minute, there's 2 parcel numbers. Like, oh, yeah, we're getting that.
Right, it was a backyard. It was a
Yeah, it was a
backyard,
small little
so
piece
it
of the
was a
backyard.
It was just a small strip of the backyard.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's not common, but it can, I mean, it can happen.
but the buyer was smarter than everybody else involved in the transaction in the moment.
Oh.
And God was looking down on me, but it could have conveyed, and
With
then we
one
would have had,
person.
yeah, and then we would have
yes.
to fix it later on.
Which is always more time consuming to fix it later on than get it figured out, obviously, up front. Oh, this was the one that was not in the MLS, right?
It wasn't
Oh, what? So
MLS,
she
but
didn't have the
she
second-
didn't
she
have
didn't have
the,
the
yeah,
second
she didn't have the
APN
second
number in
APN
MLS.
number. So what could the agents do differently to double check that?
Look at the plat map. So on the back of your document, on the back here on page, let's see, third to the last page where it says PIQ, it's property in question. And it's pointing to this lot right here. This is our property of this particular transaction. Like if you look at this cul-de-sac, the street where it's on, if you realize that your property is way over here to the northwest, but we're telling you the property in question is right here, then that should be okay, what's going on with this. You know, hey, can you guys look at your plat, can you call us and say, can you look at your plat map and this does not look like our property. On his case, he had the lot and there was just a little lot right behind that lot.
Little sliver.
So we pointed out the PIQ here without noticing that the second lot had an APN number, which it had different taxes on it
Oh my, what?
and everything, yes.
Yeah.
Cause it's a full separate different property, even though it's the backyard and you don't see a property line, it's another lot for whoever subdivided these lots, there was just another piece.
And that's, so like my personal residence, the the plot that the house is on, and then I have this sliver in front of my house that's actually the private road. And it has its own separate APN number and everything. Now, I knew about that because it was always disclosed in advance. But do your homework, double check things, ask questions.
How does that change lending? Does that change
Well,
lending at all?
It does, we have one right now that has 2 parcel numbers because the builder that built behind the track, a sliver of their lot is on our property, and that sliver of lot belongs to an HOA, but the HOA does not collect on that little sliver, so we had to go to the lender, and the lender they have to do their due diligence and research, understand it's 2 parcels conveying, there is an HOA on the prelim, because that little
Okay.
sliver,
An easement there.
but they
Wow.
don't so we had to get something from the HOA stating that they don't collect dues. We couldn't remove it because it is part of that other lot. So the lenders are usually okay once they know the explanation to it. If your underwriter's good, they understand that this happens.
But you don't have to do two deeds.
No, it goes on the same deed and the legal description has both
Yeah,
properties.
just
And
Oh.
both, and
paragraphs.
on the
Yeah.
parcel number, we put 2 parcel numbers that convey with that transfer.
Okay, so just make a note of that, do your homework, take 20 minutes and read this every time you get a new deal. And just don't assume that it's always right, because you're gonna find in this room today, as she goes through this in more detail, several of us recently who do a lot of deals can say, oh no, we've had a recent,
And when you do condos,
Situation.
if there's a garage to the condo, we need to look for the legal on the garage, if the garage conveys, cause it doesn't always,
Detached.
detached
Yeah.
garages. Because they do not always, let's say it might say garage number 21B, but when you drive up there, it's C12. It doesn't always match what the legal, God bless you, what the legal description is. So,
They have their own APN numbers.
okay?
there's some with garages that have, like it's a parking lot and a garage, that the garage has their own APN number on it too.
Wow.
Okay?
Interesting.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Is he allergic to,
Escrow.
Yes,
Tire parts?
no,
Yeah,
come on, it's
escrow.
easy. Alright, so that's your legal description, and you know, when you guys get these again, call us if you wanna go down number by number. It's very simple, sometimes you'll have sellers or buyers that want copies of everything, and that's fine, we can get them copies of everything, okay? So let's go to Schedule B, which is page 5. The first thing that will always
Section B.
be on your
Schedule B,
B,
Section B.
the first thing that will always show up are your property taxes. So property taxes show as a lien on the property, they don't ever go away. So they're telling us this year on this particular property, the annual taxes were $3866.55, paid in 4 installments. The next thing that will show up, if you have an SID, the SID will show up right under the property taxes, because that's a type of bond tax, you can call it a tax if you want to, because it doesn't go away until it's paid in full.
Who remembers what an SID is, a SID?
Or it's,
Special.
or
Special
a-
Improvement
Special-
District.
And a
Or a
lid is
lid.
a,
Limited
Limited
improvement.
yeah, and what's the difference between the two?
One's for the neighborhood and one's for the surrounding community.
That's a very general response, there's,
Commercial.
Then I'm right.
there's a little more
Improvement.
defined difference. Okay,
Limited is for upkeep.
so limited is for probably, specific reason, maybe there was a road was damaged and they need to replace it, or the gate blew over, they need to get money from everybody if it's outside of the HOA's reserves, and then special would be special use, so,
New light posts
Like,
in the neighborhood.
maintenance of the streets, the parks.
Yeah.
You know, like Summerlin has, most of the houses when they were first built up in Summerlin are in an SID. A lot of them are being paid off about right now, they're starting to be paid off, cause most of them SIDs were 15 years, and this area is starting to get to
Yeah.
15 and 20 years.
and then you've got shopping centers being put up, so that's the difference.
Is there,
between
I haven't
limited
noticed a
and
lot of
SID.
LIDs. Have you guys seen a lot
It's
of
in Green
LIDs?
Valley, mostly in Green Valley
Okay.
are LIDs.
Gotcha.
Okay, so just know, they are prominent here. Most of your HOAs are going to have, yeah, and they'll
if you're-
disclose
yeah,
them.
and if your lender is from California, they call them Melrose taxes. So they'll ask you, is that a Melrose? We don't change the name of it for ours, but you can tell them it's like your what's called Melrose tax in California. It's the same thing as an SID.
Okay. Yeah, I think
So-
Melrose Place, Melrose.
Yeah. Okay, so your common items, which are your taxes, your sewer, like for example, number 3 shows you it's subject to sewer, city liens, which is sewer. There's water rights, mineral rights, so these are all documents that have been recorded by the builder. We can always get someone copies of these documents if they wanna sit down and read them, and you'd be surprised how many people will ask for those. Water authority, power authority, these are easements. You know, if your buyers are asking why do they have these easements, it allows them to service the power on the property, the water, everything else. All properties have these type of easements. Some have less, some have more. Okay, on this one, on page
6.
6, number 12, I highlighted that there for you guys. This one is in an HOA. If this tells you, one, as a listing side, you need a resale package, obviously. It tells you on the buyer side that your buyer needs to be aware that there's an HOA. You know, I've seen up to 3 and 4 HOAs, I'm sure you guys have know about this. This one in particular only has 1 HOA. And then on page 7, when you look at item number 14, it tells you the search did not disclose any open mortgages or deeds of trust. So you're representing the seller, and the seller tells you they have a loan on the property, gave you a statement, but we're not finding it. What can happen there is the deed of trust gets misposted when it records at the recorder's office. Whether the prior title company had the wrong parcel number, the wrong legal description, it can post to the wrong it can post to Craig's property instead of my property, but it's my deed of trust. So if you know when you went into a listing appointment with your seller, they're like, well, how much am I gonna net, cause I owe $150 on it, and there's nothing here, you need to let us know right away. And that, it happens, few and far, but it definitely happens, and we start looking for misposted deeds of trust. And we search it by people's names or property addresses, even though we use only legal descriptions for posting documents. So our searcher will then have to go through a bunch of different avenues to try and look for that deed of trust. Okay. Number 15, it tells you it's subject to the community interest of the spouse of your seller. It's where we talked about if they're married. If they're married and getting a divorce, the divorce is not final, they're still married. People think they're not married. They are still married. If they're divorced in the time they own the property, we need a copy of the divorce decree. We need to see the divorce decree, all pages, and any exhibits, because usually the exhibits is a settlement agreement. Wife could owe husband $25,000 at the sale of the property. We need that to see who was awarded the property and who gets what. And that's on all transactions, every deal that you guys have. Okay, and then number 16, we do an inspection on the property. We have an inspector that goes out and drives by on all of our closings. He goes and takes a picture of the outside of the property. He does not go into the property. He's looking for construction work that could cause mechanics liens. So like, let's say for example, if there's a dumpster when Darren goes out, a dumpster in the middle of the property, he's gonna email me and tell me we have loss of priority. I'm gonna call you and say, what's going on with this dumpster outside? We're getting ready to close. Well, seller just had trashed out the property. That's not a problem. If you tell me seller is doing work on the property, then we go into the mechanics lien time, which is 90 days. We're gonna need receipts and proof of payment. Let's say they're redoing the cabinets in the house and you're getting ready to close escrow and we see the dumpster out there. That's gonna raise a lot of red flags. So if you guys know there's work going on and it's gonna be done before we close, shoot me an email and see what we can do to work it out. Cause the minute our inspector goes out there and there's work being done, that's a problem.
That's 72 hours prior to closing.
We usually do our inspections about a week prior to closing because right now closing days are changing so much that sometimes he goes out a week or 10 days before closing.
Okay.
But if you know something's going on, just say, hey,
Say it, yeah.
listen, you know, like we have a couple of investors that do rehabs. We usually call them and say, are you ready for me to send my inspector out there? Because going through the list of proof of payments and everything, it'll postpone your closing. It'll hold up your closing. Okay? Alright, the rest of this is just tells the buyer and sellers about the policy. You guys can read it, highlight anything you have questions on, and we'll go over it with you. Page 10 gives you, 10 and 11 tells you what discounts we have. Military discount, senior citizen discount over the age of 55, and investor discounts. Investors just have to have owned or flipped properties, 3 properties in the last 12 months in Clark County. Where we can just look it up on the website and verify that they did that. Okay. And these are just boilerplates on what their title policy is gonna look like and the plat map at the end that the builder recorded on the property.
So clean title report.
So this one is clean, free and clear, no deeds of trust on that one. And then we're gonna go look at Main Street. So page 1 tells you where I have it highlighted what your property address is. In the corner there, in the right corner, it tells us our proposed buyer, the sales price, who the lender is. If we have all this information when the escrow opens, sometimes, you know, the lender information comes out after, and then we update the prelim and we'll add that on there, okay? On this one, Mr. and Mrs. Seller on title as husband and wife as joint tenants on page 2. Here we go again, if he's there and let's say for example, he tells you a horrible story that his wife died 6 months prior to selling the house and now he doesn't wanna be there. We need to know that, we need to fix title, we need a death certificate, we need to record an affidavit terminating joint tenancy. Stuff like that. If it's the son trying to sell the mom's house, let's say the mom was on title as Sally Seller, unmarried. That's a probate issue right there. That, you know, if no one else is on title, it's not joint tenants, it's not a trust. If they're unmarried and it's not in a trust or anything, that property needs to go to probate. And probate is 6 to 8 weeks, once they get an attorney. Also on probate, do you guys do a lot of probates? You do?
I mean, I do,
Okay.
they don't as the team.
So, when you go to probate court also, you need to be aware, when, we just had one recently that the listing agent did not put in the MLS that it was subject to court approval. So the buyer's agent was not aware that, and it was the listing agent's first probate that she's ever done. When you go to probate court, your buyer may have put an offer in on this property, but you go to probate court, if someone is there and outbids your
It's
buyer,
sold at a public offering.
your buyer no longer, his contract is void and he no longer is a buyer on that property.
Huh.
And investors sit so probate court's on Fridays.
Yeah,
They
usually-
sit there
Usually Fridays, yeah.
and they wait for good properties to come, and they've been on properties, and that buyer who may have done the inspection and the appraisal, and the lender's ready to close, will just get outbid. Because the judge's rule is to get the most money for the estate that they possibly can. So when an investor comes in with a $20,000 higher bid, cash offer ready to close in 10 days, they're gonna go with that person, and your buyer is out. So just be aware if you look at properties online that say probate. If your, son of the deceased mom tells you he can sell the property because he signs on the bank account, it still needs to go through probate unless it's in a trust, or he's on title.
It's on topic with the probate, but do all probate homes go to that court hearing?
No, some of them are set-asides, and the attorney would need to determine how the estate is. So a set-aside is when the assets are less than $100,000, and it becomes a set-aside. So let's say they only have $20,000 equity in the property and they don't own anything else, they don't have any bank accounts or anything. Most attorneys will file for a set-aside, which doesn't go through a probate hearing, and it's given, let's say the son is the person who is the executor of the estate, it's actually deeded to the son through the estate, through the set-aside. So it does not go through a probate hearing.
Okay.
So the first thing you wanna do is make sure your client gets in front of an estate attorney. And I don't know if you guys have any that you
We
recommend.
have a few, yeah, we have a few.
Definitely need to get them in front of an estate attorney.
In fact, Jeff Burr, here in our office, he's up there.
There's a lot of estates.
He's up there.
And that's really important to understand because it can hold up closing a lot. We have one right now that a lady, we closed her last deal, her and her husband were on title together. The one we have in escrow right now, he bought through, it was a REO. He was the only one on title, she never deeded on or off, and he passed away at that. We closed one for her, and now this one she's going through probate. And she just figured, I'm the wife, he passed away, I'm the seller, it doesn't work that way.
Welcome to a community property state.
Yeah. Okay, so page 3 is still the legal description. Page 4 is your section A on Schedule B. So we're gonna go to page 5. It looks exactly the same as the last prelim. Your taxes, your easements, telephone company, easements for the builder. And on page 6, this one also has the homeowners association, Candlelight Estates. Multiple easements on this property. And then you're gonna look on page 7, item number 15.
It's gonna get fun.
This is your deed of trust. This is your seller's loan on the property. Couple things that we tell you guys to look for on this is glance at it to make sure the original loan amount is lower than what your sales price is. It sounds so silly, but it's true. People modify their loans and it extends them and it increases the principal balance on them. In this particular case, this one I highlighted, the second, underneath recording number, this is a credit line. A lot of sellers, they don't look at credit lines as deeds of trust. They think that it's like a credit card. They don't always know that a credit line is recorded against the property. And they'll also tell you if they have a zero balance, we still need to close it out and pay, and order a payoff. Because if we leave it open and they sell the property, then they can go in and encumber the property again. So they have to close out these credit lines. And we have the forms for that also.
Tracy.
Then, and Tracy has a deal right now that her buyer, her poor buyer, is also bad for them. The seller had, so they had a deed of trust here, and then there was a second one recorded underneath. There's a first and second. Back in the day, first and seconds were going on all the time. They modified their first, and the second stopped collecting, which is not unusual. Sometimes the seconds will stop collecting because it's just a waste of their money. They don't remove the deeds of trust because they know eventually that people will sell their house. In this case, I think they did their modification in 2010, so it's been 8 years. So when the escrow opened, I asked the seller for his payoff information. He gave me one loan. I asked him 4 times for his second payoff information. He told me he didn't have one. So I highlighted it and I scanned it over to him and he goes, we did a modification, that went away.
It just went into the air and just disappeared.
It didn't go away because the lender didn't release it, and it's still there, and it was sold to a collection company in August of last year, like August or October of last year. It went to Real Time Resolutions, which is a collection company that buys seconds all the time.
How much money was it?
I think it's
Yep, and some change.
$86,000 is owed, and he has the money, there is equity in the property,
You just doesn't wanna give it up.
cause he counted on it, like, they counted
Yeah.
on cashing out that additional money because they thought that those deeds of trust do not just go away.
So can
Yeah,
they, can
grand
we,
Yeah,
just
it's-
dissolves.
yeah,
can
that would
we,
be-
can he pay everything and release that just from his own money and then hold it into escrow and he can keep that leverage
Well, that's
with
two
real
things.
time?
No, because, and the reason we can't hold that money is because it's a valid deed of trust. We know it's valid. It's not, the validity of the deed of trust is not questionable. He either has to pay it in full or negotiate it and pay whatever the settlement amount is. Because if we hold the money in escrow and it goes, and it's a year and a half, we're not issuing your buyer clear title. There's still that deed of trust sitting on the property.
And what are the odds that they're gonna negotiate it once they know that you're trying to sell it?
Correct.
So we don't
So
need to
that-
negotiate it, 'cause we're
100%,
gonna take it.
and so what we do is, and what we did with him was, I said, do you want us to contact them for the payoff, or, that negates your ability to negotiate that? He said, no, I'm gonna have my attorney, short sale guy do it. But what happens is they will Google your person's name, they will figure out if they have advertisements that they sell a bunch of real estate and they make a lot of money, and then they're not gonna settle.
They have the ability to collect, so they're not gonna negotiate.
So where are you at on this one?
His attorney is trying to settle for $7,500.
So, and their first offer or whatever got rejected, so now he's saying that,
Oh, the 7,500, I've been out of the office for 2
I
days.
guess, he hasn't told me details. He just said that the first offer was rejected and that they have this guy's cell phone and he's gonna tell him a number and then he's gonna just pay it. But like, I was supposed to hear back yesterday, he never updated me. So we're just waiting for his second offer to be accepted, but like, we have until the 24th until the buyer's loan lock has expired through extension, so they have to they have to start over, get a new interest rate, which is gonna cost
Which is
them
higher, yeah.
More money.
way
Yeah.
more money throughout time, and so they've hired an attorney in the meantime. Matt doesn't know yet, and so that's where we're at.
Right. On your, because an extension was signed, he's not considered in default by not paying that yet, is that correct? Because-
So and we probably should have a sidebar after we're done today, real quick before you leave, because I do have a couple of questions. There's an addendum in place that says, if they don't perform by the 31st of,
24th.
31st
Oh,
of
July.
July,
Right, that he was
that
gonna pay it.
he has to pay it off.
Which he didn't.
And then there is an extension of close of escrow through the 24th of August. But I don't believe we've ever removed, if you don't close, you have to pay it. And so I wanna look at that kind of on its
That's,
face.
that's what I thought we should all talk about, because I've done escrow for 23 years at Chicago Title. but I don't know contract law, and I don't want to know contract law in the sense of, I can't give you advice, and I don't wanna give you wrong advice.
Yeah, and you don't
I
want
don't
the
wanna start
presumption
giving
of it,
people
yeah.
advice, because I'm not licensed in
Yep.
that area to do these things. That's why we stay out of it, but it makes me wonder in this particular case, because these poor buyers, it has dragged on for so long.
Yeah.
And
And to
they
add-
moved in, right? And I would
Yeah,
hate
they're
to
in
see,
possession.
because of his non-performance, that they end up having to move out, you know what I mean? I mean, that's upheaving your whole family.
And to add
Based
insult to
on
injury,
the
the seller is a real estate broker.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
I was gonna say,
That's
wouldn't
lovely.
that have been the listing agent, so he's representing, he's doing it himself. So I was gonna say,
Licensed.
wouldn't that have been the listing agent's job to know this ahead and to
Yes.
notify you?
So
But
he's,
since he was
and
trying to
because
get
he's a real
over,
estate broker,
he
he's held
didn't.
to the highest standards.
And
So
so,
ignorance is
Then,
not
so
an
he also
affirmative
knows
defense.
eventually he's gonna have to get paid.
so when I was saying, have you been on his website? So my concern was, when he told me about the second, is I looked him up, and you go on his website and it says, we've closed millions and millions of dollars in this and millions of dollars of that and millions of dollars of this, and I was like, who's gonna negotiate with you? I mean,
Well,
you know what I
and
mean?
Yeah.
Because
He
that's
just
what
bought $1.2 million house and is putting in a pool at the moment, and his wife, you know, is posting these things on Instagram. Well, his wife and
they're
my
both on
buyer are friends, and
Yeah.
so Jackie's seeing that we're so excited for our new pool. Meanwhile,
they
he's
can't get him to close.
yeah,
on
he
this
can't. They can't
property.
even close
And
their
that's
house.
going to be,
They were
and,
friends.
and to
That's
be
right,
honest
they
with
were
people,
friends.
that is going to be the next conversation.
Yeah, that is the concern. And- and-
That's the conversation, is, listen, you're up against the wall,
Mhm.
and you're going to lose, you know, everything you have. You're probably going to be in front of the grievance committee with your license. Oh, and by the way, here's the photos to prove that, you know, you're
You
not in
have
any
money.
distress.
Yeah, you have money.
So be careful, and so the moral of the story is, as a real estate agent, understand there's always two sides to the story, and you have a license, and you're held to a fiduciary duty. Ignorance is not a good enough defense. You have all the tools in front of you. He saw the prelim the same day that the buyer saw the prelim. The buyer saw that there were two encumbrances. No big deal. She did the quick math to say, does this all equal up to less than the sales price? It did. She had no reason to think anything else. He took almost 3 weeks to come to the surface and say, ooh, yeah, maybe we have a problem.
Well, he came 5 days before they're closing on their property.
Yeah.
What are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like, they are stuck.
It's an unfortunate.
That happens.
Turn of events.
And it happens.
Why have buyers moved in? That's where I was.
Because
Well,
they sold their house.
They had
But it
no
hasn't
They were
closed.
contingent. No,
They
they were
sold their
contingent.
they sold their,
Their
they owned a
primary.
house, and they were buying this house. They sold the house that they had nowhere else to go.
So they moved into the
Correct.
house
They have
that-
a
This
pre-occupancy.
house, but
Pre-occupancy,
they moved in
yeah.
based on an addendum stating that it was gonna close on
He said,
whatever.
he said
and-
no matter what, it's going, closing on the 31st.
Yeah.
They were generous to give him an extension, but now he is just,
And
And
now
I
there's a
imagine-
second extension
yeah.
that they have also agreed to.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's gonna come back to him because
It has- yeah.
he's running away from, you know, his problems, so.
Yeah, it's a hard, it's a tough situation. That's why when you guys get your prelims and your seller only told you about one loan and there's two loans on there, or, you know, the loan just, it doesn't look like the balances could be correct. You know, the balances never change. So this particular loan, even though it was back in 2015, it was 105, they could have, maybe they won some money, maybe they got an inheritance and they paid it down 50%. That can happen. We just need statements in order to pay off and look at that, if there's questionability there.
And a lot of times, just to add to this before we move on, a lot of times your buyer or your seller really is gonna see this and they're gonna go, I don't know that much, oh my God.
Especially on a credit line, but.
your original.
That's
right,
what you
it-
recorded.
Right,
Yeah.
nothing changes on the original recording.
Yeah.
The only time it changes is there's a modification and it gets recorded. Is the only time, and that, it doesn't change what was original, it just goes below. It goes below what was on the original deed of trust.
Okay, so just remember that. This is what was originally recorded.
I mean, prelims are really important, and I know, you know, there are some offices where they look at their commission order, making sure that's right, or, you know, that kind of thing. Title reports are really important because we don't always know what's going on. You know, we don't know what's going on. Sometimes sellers never, ever respond to us. Clearly. Sometimes they don't
It
respond
happens,
to us.
yeah.
You know, and we're happy to go into contact with them directly. Just give us their information. We will contact them, go over what we need. If it's an ugly divorce, if it's, you know, someone's in a different country, we'll explain everything. And in a different country, you guys, other than Canada, they have to sign at the embassy. You know, if the embassy's 3 hours away, the excuse is not they can't go because it's 3 hours. They have to find a way to get to the embassy. We only take US notaries in other countries other than Canada. Canada, they can use a licensed attorney.
And oh, by the way, some other escrow companies have more strict rules. Chicago's national, they're kind of middle of the road when it comes to policies and procedures and how far they'll stick their neck out there, but some have stronger rules.
And in some countries, like for example, we've closed a couple in China, it takes 3 to 4 weeks to get an appointment at the embassy. In some countries, they can get an appointment within a day or two. So it just all depends on where they're at.
And when they go, they have to send the original documentations, by the way. We did this with a deal where he was in France. They have to send them, and sometimes they don't realize, because they don't know our mail system, they just do it in post. That's like going to
Instead
the,
of
that's like
tracking
going to the
it,
post
drop it,
office.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, it needs to, so you have to have that conversation with them as well, and say, this thing needs to be as fast as you can.
And send us a tracking
Tracking
number
numbers.
so we can look for it, stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay?
And when we send those documents out, we have a very detailed email of where they can get it signed, that we need the original back. We even ask them if they want to scan it, a copy to us, so we can review it first. We're happy to do that, so then by the time that they ship it to us, we know that instead of getting the day of closing, we get the deed and it's not notarized correctly. You know, we always want them to send it to us first.
Okay? All right,
Okay,
moving on.
So payoffs, that vestings, out of state, out of country, let us know ahead of time. And we send you guys out a little form that says special request. You know, that's somewhere you can put, they're out of state, out of the country, someone wants to sign by a power of attorney, and speaking of power of attorneys, we recently had a file that, so our underwriters are gonna ask why someone needs to sign by power of attorney. The response on this particular, deal was, husband wanted to sign the contract because wife worked and had kids. That's not gonna, we're not gonna allow a power of attorney because someone works and has kids. We're gonna allow a power of attorney if someone is leaving the country, can sign the deed in the power of attorney now, and then their power of attorney can sign while that person is gone. We do power of attorneys if they have a durable, health, a legal issue that they can have doctor's notes for. Like, we're very careful on power of attorneys because people swindle people out of money all the time. Kids are trying to get their parents' money, parents are trying to get their kids' money, and either we do too much or we don't do enough, because if they lose their money, it's gonna be our fault. So it's just to protect the buyer and the seller and everyone else involved. So power of attorneys are not always just, sure, she works and has a job, husband doesn't get to sign based on that. Especially with DocuSign now, you know, she could sign her deed up front with the notary and everything else we can send her DocuSign. It wouldn't take more than 30 minutes of her time, you know, stuff like that. So power of attorneys are not just okay.
Military, right?
Military.
That's what you were.
And we accept military power, like if they already have a power of attorney sign, a lot of people when they get deployed, they have a military power of attorney sign, we will accept those day in and day out.
Any questions on that? The life of an escrow flow chart?
Now we're moving on
So let's start on this, on the page with the yellow block on there. I haven't seen one of these since the last time I came home. So this just basically tells you who does what and what order it gets done in. And you know, all escrows are basically, you know, will basically end up the same way. It just tells you here that if you represent a buyer, you want your buyer pre-approved prior to going out, but I'm sure Craig goes into all that stuff with you guys. When the appraisal is ordered, when the home inspection is, so a lot of that stuff is handled outside of the escrow. So once it comes to me, once you send us your contract, we'll send you an escrow number back. When the prelim comes in, we'll tell you what we need from your seller or even your buyer sometimes. If we think someone's divorced, sometimes your buyers and sellers just call us automatically. We'll always let you know.
And on average, when does your preliminary title report, escrow instructions, commission order, seller statement, and seller loan payoff request, when do those get sent out?
3 to 4 days from the time escrow opens. If you guys have a quick closing, I always look at close of escrow days. So if you open something that's closing within 2 weeks, We'll usually get it the following day, 2 days at the 1 to 2 days at the most. Because we pay really good attention to your closing date.
And Kathy is really good about kind of sending that opening package out with everything all at once. And we're really good when we represent a seller to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we need you to fill out these 2 documents, which is gonna be the payoff, make sure it's signed, and then it's going to be the seller information. Seller information is becoming more and more important because there's a lot of people out there with commonality, and they're looking for that needle in the haystack. They're looking for, does all of this information all line up, and is there something that's kind of wacky so that we can dive in quickly and get it resolved, instead of, well, we're 3 days from closing and we still don't have your seller information sheet, and by the way, Maria Hernandez is a very common name.
And there's 50 judgments that we need to clear on it.
Yeah.
You know, so, and that takes a long time. It doesn't take a long time for us to get them out. It takes a long time for the attorneys to respond, to tell, you know, a lot of attorneys will tell us, we have one person that works in that department and it'll take 5 days. You know, so if you have common name, even common Hispanic name, which doesn't sound common to you, they use 2 last names, our searcher searches both names, because maybe Maria Hernandez goes by Maria Gonzalez Hernandez.
Or Maria
You know,
Hernandez Gonzalez,
right.
so yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So we do need those forms, and you know, another thing we do on those seller forms is sometimes we use the address on the taxes for your seller, but sometimes they move out of state and they don't update any of their mailing addresses. So they'll change their address on that seller form, which will flag us to flag that file that your seller's out of state. And that we know closer to closing, we need to set up a mobile notary for your seller in a different state.
Yeah.
And so we use that for a lot of information, not just because we're trying to bug you guys. I
And I
promise.
mean, I early on, that was, you know, I was bucking that system, and then I realized, wow, this is really valuable to us, and so we handle a lot of that on your behalf. You know, Rihanna and Jody and I do that. It's still very important. Okay, it's still the expectation. Hey, we're gonna open up escrow within a couple of days. They're gonna send out a package. It's gonna ask you for some personal information, and here's why. You're also gonna get a commission order, you're gonna get your preliminary escrow instructions, you're gonna get a preliminary title report. Just have the conversation, this is what's gonna happen, and then this is what's gonna happen next, okay? Something else that I don't know that's in here that the law has changed 2 years ago was now, instead of having HOA documents 15 days prior to closing, we have to order the resale package within 5 days of acceptance of offer.
And that is not on there because that's handled outside of escrow. Because see, we wouldn't have known that changed either.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people counter different, like they need something sooner, right? Like if it's
You know, I don't see it much with the HOA docs, but that lead-in conversation is something that Kathy does different to some escrow companies is she's going to order the request for HOA demand payoff around the first of the month if we're going to close.
in that month.
in
So
a new month.
usually 3 to 4 weeks out, we'll send you guys a link for the HOA demand payment. You know, if you have a 60-day escrow, we're not gonna send it out at the beginning because your demand's gonna expire and then your seller's gonna be mad because they have to pay for another demand. So we track the timing on the HOA demand. I go through files every other day to make sure that we're up to date on the time that we're looking at. So if you guys know your escrow's closing early, please keep us in the loop. Tell us if you're closing early or even if you're extending, because you don't want that extra expense when it's not needed.
HOA demands typically are only good for 15 days.
15, and like, you know, 15 for first service is definitely 15 days. Everyone else, let's say we're closing at the end of August and we order at the beginning of August, it'll be good through that month. They're typically good through that month.
Okay.
But some of them charge for updated demands. You know, a lot of them charge for rushes. So if you know that the buyer got qualified, the seller's willing to move out or is vacant and everyone wants to close in 15 days, but I have a 30-day escrow, let us know so we can get all these out to you in time and it's not more in fees.
And there are, some of you have done escrows in the past where all of those fees and costs for escrow documents and demands and all that stuff has been put into escrow. Chicago Title doesn't do that. And so you have to have the conversation. There's a few expenses that you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are gonna have up front, and this is what they are. Okay, and they're gonna, unless they're countered out in a contract, they're going to be the demand, average $150. They're gonna be a resale package, average $150. And then if there's additional HOAs,
Correct.
it could be additional
2 and 3,
costs.
it's gonna be double those amounts. Double.
Okay.
And our transaction coordinator orders the homeowner.
She deals with that, but you still need to know that, you know, that's,
Right.
you're
To
still the
remind them.
licensee, you need to know those
You need
things.
to remind them,
Yeah,
okay.
Sometimes you have to hold us
You're meeting with your
accountable.
sellers, right? You're like, so prepare them for that, because then sometimes people are yelling at us because they don't know the difference between the resale package and the HOA demand, and those are two things that they're required
Oh,
to
okay.
provide. So they're like, they'll say, I already
That is a
paid for that.
Yeah,
Well, the resale package has all
The rules.
the rules, the regulations, the bylaws,
Right.
the budget.
CCs and Rs.
Okay.
Yep,
That has what the
CCNRs,
resale
yes.
package, the demand tells me at closing that I need to collect 2 months up front, that the seller has a
Ah.
$1,500 balance and they're in lien and they have violations and the
an
transfer fee
invoice,
is.
so to speak.
Yes. It's a current
Okay, I've seen
statement,
that.
it's a statement and demand of what's going on in that account, which is totally separate than resale package.
Okay, great.
And sometimes what happens is escrow, you know, because they're a little on the automated side, they do this so much, they have really strong systems in place. They're sending out the link for the demand before the agent ever gets around to ordering the resale
That
package.
happens a lot.
And so the seller thinks, I just paid for everything. No, you didn't.
Right,
You just did it backwards because we're rushing to get the resale package done, okay?
and a lot of times it happens when you guys start looking for, if you represent the buyer, when you start looking for the buyer's resale package, the other agent's like didn't, hasn't ordered it. Yeah, we see that all the time.
Awesome. So moving through that,
So this just gives you the graph of, like I said, your approvals, your inspections, which I know you guys have a big setup for all that kind of stuff. When we get when your loan docs comes in for the buyer, we let you guys know when the docs come in. We send you a settlement statement. If you guys want to start going over your settlement statements, if they're unfamiliar to you, we're happy to go over them line by line with you. On your seller side, same thing. We always send you settlement statements, whether you represent the buyer or the seller. We're assuming that most agents are looking at them, some don't. If you have reimbursements, you guys don't do a lot of reimbursements.
usually it's on HOAs.
If you have reimbursements, if you know repairs are coming up, if you know there's an addendum out there for a credit, it might not be on there, that means we don't have something. So take a look at it, if you guys wanna go over them, we're more than happy to go over them with you.
And not all escrow companies will send you a settlement statement, just so you know.
And we
Maybe
do,
their
so
intention is.
your buyer and your seller don't have sticker shock when they come in to sign, they're prepared for what's going on. I do wanna talk about wiring instructions with you guys. So wiring instructions we send out to your buyers secured via secure email. We will not send them out to anyone else other than your buyer or a third-party depositor. So if you guys call and say, my buyer's traveling today, I need them, we will not send them to you. And the reason that is most agents forward them unsecured. Because, we have a different system than you guys work off of. We have a lot of security in our system. Not that you guys don't, but for wiring instructions, we go through several layers of security. And if you get them and then you forward them unsecured, they can
Wow.
be captured from there.
So, I'm assuming what people do is like a hacker will grab it,
They'll
change
sit-
the address, and then
They change the account number.
and they ship
And
it
they'll
to
look
an offshore
exactly
account.
like our,
Yeah,
they'll look exactly like my wiring instructions with a different account number on there.
and then it goes to an overseas
It
account.
even goes
and it's
local.
gone.
I mean,
Oh.
it'll go to a bank in Tennessee, and they are literally waiting outside the bank for that wire to hit. They walk in, they withdraw the money, and they're gone.
It's just gone.
You would
Just like
be
that.
surprised, I was just in an event, we on average like 32 times a day that we stop it, like locally,
Wow.
a day. So you can imagine on a national
A lot of
level.
scammers probably.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, if they put their energy into getting a job, it would be amazing what they could do. It would be amazing what they could
They're so
create, because I mean, they are creative, and unfortunately, it's in deceiving people,
Yeah,
it's stealing
smart, but-
instead of
Yeah.
doing smart things with it, but it is amazing. We've seen, whenever it happens, if it happens to one of the title companies in town, we do share it with each other, because one, we don't want anyone to take those kind of losses, and we wanna know what to look for.
Yeah.
We wanna see what they're doing and how they're doing it, and what they do is, they sit on emails, especially realtors, because you guys are online, you advertise you're a realtor. They compromise emails, they sit there and they wait for a type of transaction to happen. They're very, very patient, they're extremely patient, and they will change all the information. They'll even send us, let's say your seller came into signing and he's getting $30,000. They'll send us an email with something that looks very similar to your seller's email and tell us in email that we changed our wiring instructions.
Wow.
So this is what it looks like for you. Your buyer opens up escrow, their transaction coordinator or the agent sends everything over to Kathy's office, and they say, our buyer is going to be wiring, please get hold of our buyer. Now, we all know, so now our conversation changes. There was a time when it was, send me the wiring
Mhm.
instructions. And they would send even.
We did it all the time.
Yeah, and then we
did
even
it all
got to a
the
place
time.
where they would send a secure email to me. I would download the PDF and then send it unsecured. So,
Because we don't have that same
Yeah.
mind. We're not thinking what those people are thinking.
Right.
We don't have that mentality. We're just like, hey, my wires in escrow, he needs to go to the bank and send a wire.
so
Not
now,
thinking what they think.
so now what'll happen is your conversation with the buyer is, hey, listen, we're gonna open up escrow with Kathy Stevens over at Chicago Title. Somebody from her office is going to call you first to confirm that you are who you are, ask you some questions, and then they're going to validate the information that we've given them, the email address or et
We
cetera.
validate the email address and then we give them an access code.
Yes,
We never email the access code because that would defeat the whole purpose
Right.
of sending things
Sending
by
the-
email. So what we do is we call your buyer and we say, hey, congratulations on your accepted offer at 123 Main Street. We have this email for you. We're gonna send you wiring instructions. You need to sign them and then you need to take those to the bank to send your wire. Here's your access code. And we give them an access code. It's a DocuSign. So when they go into DocuSign, they have to put the access code in before they can get into the document.
So do you have insurance for, is there insurance for if, on the off chance it happens that you take hacker takes $350,000 from somebody?
Well, it's in our particular company, it's a dollar for dollar loss for us. If we, so for example, if your seller gave me wiring instructions and I took a fraudster's wiring instructions and either one didn't figure it out or didn't verify it and I send money to the wrong person, we take a dollar for dollar loss on that. And then on top of that, we have to still pay your seller because just because we sent it to the wrong place doesn't mean your
Right.
seller's not due his funds.
Right.
So it's, when your seller comes in, we call them the day of closing and verify again what their wiring instructions are. And some people get really mad at us.
So we
No, but
should
I
set
would-
the expectation, of this is to protect you.
Yes.
Until
Exactly.
they understand why you're
100%.
doing it.
Believe
Yeah.
me, and then just a
Yes.
really quick, like, for instance, and then they just shut right
Correct.
up, okay.
This is to save you your money.
Right.
We're trying our best to protect you, us, everyone involved from huge lawsuits. We're trying to keep everyone's money as secure as we can.
so now let's play the devil's advocate and you scare your buyer and your buyer's like, well, then I'm just gonna take a check into
Oh,
escrow.
God.
Can they do
Okay.
that?
They legally can. We are what's called a good funds state. So provided there's plenty of time for those funds to clear
So
escrow.
for earnest money, as long as you write in your so most people write in their contract wire transfer. We go off the contract. If you put wire transfer in your contract and the buyer comes in with a check, we have to check with the other side to make sure that everyone's willing to accept that check.
Right, because contractually they had to wire.
Because
Oh.
on your contract, you put wire on there.
Okay.
And that happens more often than people realize, and then we get why do we question it? We're just,
Just
my
going
job
off
is
of
to
what
go
in
off
the
the
contract.
contract.
Yeah.
My job is to go off your contract.
Interpret, not negotiate.
Yes.
So
Yep.
anything that changed needs to be approved by all parties, an
Correct.
addendum or something.
Or,
Always
like in the
extra.
case of the check versus the wire, I'll take an email from a listing agent that says check is fine, and then I upload that into my particular escrow going,
Yeah.
and that has to be within a, if it's a two week or longer period, and if it's 2 weeks, we still try to verify that check clearance prior to closing. But for closing funds, yes, we can. I would tell you, out-of-state cashier's checks take up to 4 weeks to clear.
People don't realize that, like,
But if I came in your office and dropped it off,
But
that's
it-
okay.
if
But
you
how
got
many
it from
days?
Indiana and you came in, it can take up to 4 weeks, even though you brought it in. Local cashier's checks, depending on the bank, take up to 5 days to clear.
So we give it to you at the closing, or we can give it to you prior to closing?
Prior to, it
Okay.
would have to be
Indeed.
prior to unless you're signing way ahead of time, which is
Yeah.
not
Right.
typically normal. So you can give us this prior to, but let's say for example, your closing date is in 5 days, but the bank takes 7 days to confirm that that check is clear.
Oh.
We're not gonna waiver on that.
Okay.
And then once we deposit it, your buyer can't get the money back to go send a wire either.
Mm.
So what is the conversation for escrow and what is the conversation for closing funds? Escrow, I would recommend you as an agent, either write and or, so there's a spot in the RPA where
I was
you
actually
could
gonna say
write,
that.
you could write, certified
Check or
funds,
wire,
check or,
yep,
or,
100%.
and or.
Yep.
You could do both if you wanted to, they just need to be able to interpret it.
And if it says check or wire, and the buyer wants in for the check, we don't call anyone because it says check or wire, it doesn't matter.
I actually had
Oh, I
a
like
title
that.
company, can't remember who it was telling me that they don't accept checks, like they
For-
only wires, so that's not
For
true.
openings, we absolutely we can accept checks. For closing funds our wires because they're good funds, or we don't take a personal check for closing funds no matter what. But if it's if someone insists on it being a cashier's check, which will hold up closing, and so they usually change their mind on that, we have to wait till we get confirmation that that check is cleared their
I
bank.
mean, I had someone tell me that the EMV, they don't accept.
A lot of people,
They
I'm
only
telling-
wire, but you're
it
saying
is-
they can,
We can.
technically.
Chicago Title can't, what everyone, like, it all, if that company had a lot of losses on checks,
Oh, then they
they
can have
may
their own
just
policy,
make their
okay.
policy that they will no longer take a check.
I always tell people it's easier to wire, it's just like easier, it's a nice little
But
clean
the
track
same
of the
check,
money.
but the same check, bad check laws apply.
Mhm.
You write a check, okay, to open up a contract,
Oh, yeah. it says
and
on
that
the
check
first page.
bounces,
It says on the first page.
okay? I'm
Well,
letting you
sometimes
know,
if it's
I'm letting you
check,
know,
then
a
they
couple
have
of
to
things
see
will
the
probably be
account that it
happening,
came
and
out
one of
of,
them's
the
not buying a
lender
home.
wants to see the account, it's just more headache.
So,
just-
so the conversation is great, certified funds, if that's what you need to do, make sure we have a long enough escrow so that those clear. Wire is always going to be better, cause we're a good fund state, I know it's gonna be a little more headache in the beginning, but it's for your protection and security. Oh, and when we close, your closing funds will need to be wired, it'll be the same routing and
Same wiring instructions.
wire
correct.
instructions, so keep those in a safe place.
Yeah.
We can always verify it right before closing if we need to. Okay, so that's the conversation. You're gonna have other escrow companies that are gonna have their own play. You create your system and standard so that no matter what escrow company you go to, it's always the same conversation, okay?
You guys, I wanna give you these statistics, I was wrong. So in Q2, just in 2018, total attempts were 265 for wire fraud. 49 were successful.
Those are
40.
pretty good odds.
48
That's why they keep doing it.
million was targeted though. 48 million. 11 million was diverted, and we were able to recover 2.2.
Wow, so
The money's
almost 10
still-
million.
Yeah,
It's scary,
that's.
I mean, we're dealing with closing escrows every day, and then we're dealing with this, and then we're dealing with, we're dealing with trying to keep everyone's money secure.
And that was just in Q2.
And wire fraud was a lot worse before you guys had like a very good security system too, correct? Like
Well,
a couple of years ago, it may have been even worse
Well, actually, it's getting worse.
I think it's on,
Oh, it's
it's on the
getting worse.
rise.
It's on the rise.
People are
It's
just
on the
getting
rise.
smarter.
The more
because now
technology.
it's in the news. So the fraudsters who didn't know about it see it on the news now, so they want in on
They
it.
get in on it.
Exactly. And these guys are really smart, I
Yeah,
mean,
why don't they
some
just
of
get
them
their
do
real
it.
estate
Too
license?
bad.
Isn't
They
it
can steal
crazy?
money
That's what I
from
say.
people that real
Why
estate
don't you
licenses.
use those brains for something productive
Yeah.
and not where
Sit in
you're
front of
running
a
all the
computer
time,
and
you
slide
know?
funds from
Too,
one
it's
place to
probably
another.
too easy for some of them.
Yeah, it is, and they, luckily they go to smaller title companies because they don't have the money behind the security. They go through smaller companies that do not spend the money to do our best to secure everybody. That doesn't mean it's not gonna happen even within our own company.
Less likely.
But yes, because we have teams and teams of people everywhere.
It's more of an intimidating presence.
Yeah. When you have a small company, they're not spending their money on something like that. They're spending their money on marketing, or they're spending their money on flyers or something else. They're not spending their money on security, where that security is really huge right now.
Yes, be super careful about that. I've actually mentioned that to a couple of different groups before. When you have those smaller title companies, make sure that if that escrow officer is sending you those escrow instructions, you better call her and say, why are you sending these to me? You
Yeah.
just opened me up for liability. And I always think, how awful would it be if you had a cash buyer and they went in and put their life savings in escrow and it was gone like that because of the escrow company? I mean, not to say, that's what you could be with smaller title and escrow companies, cause they just don't have the
And
funds.
if it's coming into us and we don't get it, we don't pay that loss. If we send out secure wiring instructions and someone else forwarded them somehow, unsecured, that, we're out of it at that point
You're
of.
protecting yourself.
Correct. We're out of it at the point of reimbursing anyone. If we send them out incorrectly,
So whoever screwed up, screwed, pretty much.
Yeah, and it could I'm telling you, out of Denver right now, at this meeting, there's an agent in Denver that's being sued for it.
and it's an older couple who who purchased a property and used all the money they had saved to purchase the property, and the wiring instructions were changed on them. They went to the bank, I think it's $230,000.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
my
a little over
They sent
$200,000.
$230,000 to the wrong place because the wiring instructions were changed in their email or in their agent's email, and they have no money.
And
And they have
it's
no
a
house. They have no
horrible
money and they have no
story.
house.
Yeah, it's all over
And
the
you can actually
newspapers.
Google that story. It's very, very easy to find that story, and it's just devastating at this point. And they are suing, obviously, their
Everybody.
agent, their title company. They're actually suing the title company too. You know,
The
a lot of
bank?
people sue the title company because they think that we have deeper pockets and might as well just throw you in there. But if the attorney figures out that there was nothing the title company could do, they're gonna be out of that, they're gonna be taken out of
So
lawsuit.
that's a good example, really quick, to give your client that they ask, well, why is this a real pain in the ass? Well, here you go. I'm just gonna
Exactly.
forward this to you and call me back if you have any questions. And I should just.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's been all over the news there, Ryan has been telling me about it too. And of course, the couple's living in their son's basement now, and the agent has been just slung through the mud.
It's
You
a,
don't
it's
want
a
any
sad
part
story
of
for
it.
everyone. It's, you know, the agent wasn't thinking that way. He didn't expect that to happen. It's devastating
And people
for
get busy and
everybody.
it's this human error you're looking and they're counting on you guys to
And
get
you
big,
don't,
you're
you're
looking at
not
millions
looking
a
at things
day.
that way. If that's not your normal, you don't think about it. When wire fraud first started coming up to us, we were like, they're doing what? Like, it didn't even make sense to us.
Write this down on a piece of paper. The cost of defending yourself in Clark County District Court, which means something's over $10,000, is $18,000 to $25,000.
Wow, I did not know that.
Just to start. Just open up the case, file answers, motion to dismisses, try to get yourself out. Just to open up the case.
That's like your retainer. That's
Yeah.
your retainer fee.
$18,000 to $25,000, and that's assuming you're gonna get dismissed out of it. Okay?
So that's without having to fight the.
Yep,
the
that's
case.
just somebody suing you, it's in district court, it's not in small claims or justice court, which means it's over $10,000, you're a named defendant. You could, there's always ways around this, but to get yourself to a place where you know you didn't do anything wrong and you just need to get dismissed out, okay, which means you have to go through summary judgments, and you gotta go through motion to dismiss, you gotta go through open discovery, $18,000 to $25,000, and because you're an independent contractor, it's not my responsibility unless I did something wrong with you, and it's not Sharon's or Keller Williams unless we did something wrong. Now, we might get dragged in as well, and that's okay,
You'll be
maybe.
released.
but that's your cost to defend yourself as a business owner.
So long story short, ignorance is not bliss.
So as we say,
Correct.
ignorance is not an affirmative defense, okay?
You're the licensed agent. We're the licensed title company.
Mhm.
She's the licensed broker.
That's right.
And they're gonna go after everybody.
Yeah, they're gonna throw it out there and sue everybody and then let you guys figure out that you didn't do something wrong.
Sue everyone.
Yeah, and it's gonna happen more and more. And this is a way to purge our market, it's a way to purge, unsuccessful agents, because people do a lot of weird things where they make bad decisions. They think, oh, well, no, I have to give the preliminary title report over to my client. It's not, I don't need to look at it, it's not, no. There's a reason why it gets sent to the agent in addition to the buyer or the
Now,
seller.
because we ask for, so let's say, for example, you go back to doing checks for your earnest money, still give us your buyer's email address, because we also email out the prelim at opening. If we have an email on file, if not, we send in the mail. A lot of times they don't look at their mail.
Or they call and freak out and say, you just sold my home, I got something from escrow.
Which, you know what, that's, the good thing about that is people who are
Just
not
have
selling
that.
their home and
Yeah.
someone's trying to sell their home for
Yes.
them. So that's another reason why we do mail stuff out, especially out-of-state sellers. Even if we have an email address, we mail it to them, because not yet with us, thank goodness, and I hope it never happens, but sellers have been notified by things coming in the mail that someone else is trying to sell their property in a different state.
This is typically their largest asset, buyer or seller. So yeah, there needs to be a lot of time and energy put into this. There needs to be a lot of safeguards, because this is typically, at the time, the largest transaction they will ever do. Now, hopefully they'll buy something bigger, and then that will be the largest. But the transaction you're in today with your buyer and seller is based off of, emotion and stress and unknowns. You guys learned something today that you didn't even know about prelims. So imagine what everybody else out there in the
Yeah,
world
it's all
doesn't
Greek
know.
to them, it's complete, they don't understand.
Most agents don't know what you know.
90 hours to get a license.
Yeah, and you know what, we don't have people like Kathy and me and Sharon that are passionate about our industry sitting here and telling you guys, no, stop.
Ask questions, call us,
Yeah.
email us, always ask questions.
There's gonna be so many agents that have no idea.
Well, and then
And
they're the
they're
ones
just
that are
kind
on the
of
back
walking
of,
in the
you
dark
know, the
and-
real estate division.
One day they'll step on a needle.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
So this is really good stuff. This is probably an area that we taught this last year. That was awesome. This is an opportunity for you guys to grab the bull by the horns and say, you know what, this makes me an expert because I know something about this that probably everybody else in real estate that I'm gonna be up against doesn't even know about.
Yep.
So you can grab that and you can feel confident going in with your buyer and seller saying, I know something about the preliminary title report that people don't know, and here's what it is. Okay?
Alright, and they have more questions deeper than what you know, have them call us.
Yeah.
Always let us deal with them sometimes to get, especially if they want copies of documents that are on the preliminary title report, we can pull those documents for them. Some people come from different counties where they look at every single thing on there, and some people never even look at it. It just depends on how it happened where they live.
And they close in different states where the rules, they're in mortgage
Roundtable
states and
closings,
attorney
where they
states,
just transfer
yeah.
keys at the table and the money at the table, like it's so different.
So it brings me to two real quick questions. And I know this is really about the preliminary title report, but the title report talks about an insurance policy. So tell us the difference in the title report policies.
So we issue a Alta homeowners policy, that's what we
ALTA.
considered a standard policy that we issue. And I'll make a note to send you a flyer on, we have a really nice graph that tells you what the coverage is. So I'll
And there's
send you
typically
the-
two, right? So there's the ALTA policy.
And a standard policy. There's actually a few, so on residential homes, let's go with residential homes, there's an Alta homeowners policy and an Alta standard policy. The homeowners policy has more coverage, I'm gonna send you the flyer on what the coverage is. Owner occupied can only get an Alta homeowners policy. If it's a investment property, an LLC or corporation, they get a standard policy. They don't get the extra coverage that an actual homeowner gets. Vacant land, it's a CLTA policy. It's the least coverage, and that's because the risk of vacant land, there's not a whole lot to insure on vacant land other than the dirt, and we can search vacant land is very easy. And there's no home on there, so they don't get a homeowner's policy, they get a CLTA standard policy. But I'll send, or you know what, or we can come out and do a class on that too, we can either send you a flyer or come out and do a class
Okay.
with the flyer.
Just understand, it'll probably be 5 years before you have a buyer or seller say, well, what's the difference and why do I have to have this policy? Because some escrow companies at one time, and I don't even know if they're still doing it, or title policy companies, I should say, they were offering like, here's this policy, and then
But
you
you
can
can pay
get,
more
you can
for
pay
this.
more and get this
So,
policy,
correct.
and it created confusion.
Yes, so First American they have an Eagle policy and they charge extra for the Eagle policy. We decided an Eagle policy and an Alta homeowners policy is the same thing. We decided to make the homeowners policy our standard policy out there as a benefit to the buyer. So it's just standard, there's no extra amount for paying extra coverage. It's not an option, we give the best policy there is to an owner occupied property.
And then
Should be.
Standard to the investors, okay.
So there was a question on the team last week, and this is a good opportunity to ask it. When they're vesting, you have somebody who is single, unmarried, married, divorced, widowed. How does that all translate to, because we can't give them legal advice. In fact, I would always strongly
Not
encourage them,
recommend
never tell them, oh, well, are you married, are you not? Say, let's get you on the phone with
Right.
somebody who can guide you through it, because that is a tax liability for your borrower. It is a deed of trust liability.
There could be. So we will not advise either, but we will tell you. So if you've never been married, your vesting is supposed to be single. If you've been married and divorced, your vesting is supposed to be unmarried. However, taking title as single and unmarried, as long as you are not married, it still works properly. The only time you get into issues is when your buyers, let's say for example you have a husband and wife, and their deed of trust does not have a vesting at the end. So typically, 90% of people take title as John Smith and Jane Smith, husband and wife, as joint tenants. Joint tenants means if someone passes away, it automatically goes to
Goes
the
to the next
surviving,
person.
yes.
Right, so
And you can
survivorship.
even do that with a mom and dad. Any two people that are on title can be on title as joint tenants. Then if you have people that go in an investment property, if Craig and I went to go buy a property and we put as to a 50% undivided interest, that means Craig's estate gets his half if anything happens to him, and my estate gets my half. It's not joint tenants. If he passes away,
It goes to his
then I'll
next
have
of- yeah.
then I'll have another person that I'm on title with.
Yep.
You know, stuff like that. Trusts, obviously, trusts tell you that you're holding title on the trust. But, so you, and then some places have as community interest as joint tenants, which is very similar, and that's where you need to know if there's any tax liability of those, cause I don't know either. So if you have, and this is usually only on people that have huge assets that their attorney wants them to hold title a particular way. But as joint tenants is typically, but you know, you'll see a husband and wife that are on their second or third marriage, and they want their kids to have their share, so they'll take title as as tenants in common, and divide it, because I want my kids from my first marriage to have my share, and you want your kids from your first marriage, so it's not uncommon that happens once in a while.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of like, at least I don't think we see a lot of like tenancy for life and things like that where people can draw out, well, you know, the estate owns the home, but you're the surviving spouse, so as long as you're alive, you can stay. We don't see a
Right,
lot
no,
of that,
The only thing
but there are
now-
laws that
yes.
allow it.
And what we're seeing now are state attorneys are doing, it's called a death upon deed. And a death upon deed is it records, so let's say Craig is deeding his property to me if he passes away, and that deed stays recorded on title, it doesn't change the vesting, Craig's still on title, and it just states that instead of it going through probate, once he passes away, you have to go fill out all this paperwork to be able to deed it to that person, so it's still,
But it's not intested.
correct.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
another
then the
class,
state
another
attorney-
day.
the state attorney-
I didn't even know about that one.
Death upon deed,
I
yeah,
had
and a
not
state
heard about
attorney
that
can
one.
help with that too.
Yeah. So, however, why is that important for you? Well, when you are I don't wanna use the word vesting, but when you are, having conversations with your buyers and sellers and you are trying to find out, are they married, are they unmarried, are they single, are they divorced? We're having a lot of them say, oh, I'm single. Were you ever? Well, yeah, I'm divorced, but I'm single now.
And that divorce raises a flag
Yes.
on a seller. Well, when did you get divorced? 3 weeks ago? Okay, well, we need to see your divorce. Be prepared because title's gonna need to see your divorce decree. And then in Nevada, we also have domestic partnership, legal domestic partnership. And it can be a man, a woman, or a man and a woman. It doesn't matter what sex it is, but if they're filed legal domestic partnership, paperwork wise, it's just like being married. Their significant other has to sign a deed. Cause it's our state recognizes it and it was filed.
Yeah, and there was a period of time where that was prominent before Nevada,
Marriage,
took the marriage laws after California. So you will find people that have the rights to get married now and don't
Or
because
still file legal domestic partnership.
because Nevada just recognizes them for insurance purposes and
Correct.
benefits and all that. Okay. Any other questions? So we covered a lot today. You got some really good stuff. You got some good nuggets. While you think about if you have anything, thank you both for coming
I
in.
have my cards over here, if you guys need my email address, if you go through it, or as you're going through an escrow, if you guys have questions, we're always here for you guys.
Kathy and her team are always available. And they'll always call you back if they are busy. But they kind of round robin the phone, and they all have access. She's got 6 or 7 people in her office, and they can all pull up our files at the same time, even if they're not the one that you've been working with. They're really good at that. And one of the benefits with Kathy and her team is they have their systems in place. And sometimes we will come from the position of, well, I didn't have to do this before, or why do you make me go through this? Trust me, it's so that we streamline the process, they get all the information they want, and they can look for any loopholes in the beginning and help rectify that so that you obviously can close for your client and you can get your commission check. Okay?
We know that's everyone's, we wanna get everything closed for everyone on time and smooth, not at the 10th hour and deal with some really bad stuff.
Okay? And if you haven't met Jamie, You probably should. She's here more often than Kathy. Kathy comes in once a year.
Otherwise, I'm behind my desk.
Yeah.
You know what, I know you guys, a lot of you guys were on vacation last Friday, I believe it was. So I had a, training set up for you guys with the developer of a product that's really hot right now. So what I'm gonna end up doing is having him, conference in, and we'll either come in here or in the big room and he can conference in. And I just wanna let you know, it's called Active Farm. You may, Tracy, some of you have been around for a while, you may have already seen this come through in your email. Active Farm is a strategic way to farm, meaning that it will notify you when somebody in your farm has gotten married, divorced, or had a baby, and other different life events. You can email from it.
divorced.
Yeah, it's a really robust system. I do not even wanna teach it to you. That's how robust it is. I'd rather that the developer teach it, because I don't wanna tell you something
That's
wrong.
a lot of information.
There's a lot of information,
Wow.
so I'm gonna get back with Rihanna, and then we'll get that scheduled, so make sure, whatever date that we schedule that for, make sure you're here, cause you're gonna, if you haven't heard about it, you should be hearing about it on the streets from your peers, from emails that are coming through, it's amazing, okay?
Thank
All right.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay, guys.
Nice
You
to
guys
see
take-
everybody.
Take 10 minutes, everybody. I know we're a little over, so we'll shorten the
Sorry.
sales meeting.
Nice meeting you.
Sorry, Craig, did you wanna
Do you wanna-
answer or ask a question?
Yeah, I think she answered it. She just
Okay.
answered it after the fact.
Okay.
And my big question is, how are they going to interpret the addendum? So if you laid it all out, how are they going to interpret the addendums?
Well, I mean, at this point, the way that I interpret the addendum is the seller had to pay by the end of the month, but we can't make the seller pay, that's
Right.
where the problem is.
But you feel
And we
that
don't
that
even
is,
have we don't even have the demand.
right, and you feel though that close on or before the 31st and pay if you can't settle is still in full force. We just extended the close of escrow date.
You have your
The
appointment.
settle part, yes.
Yes, that's how I
It will
feel.
be if I don't.
Because it
right
wasn't
now.
addressed in the extension, but the problem is
purpose.
the seller's gonna look at it as, well, you gave us an extension, and that's where we kinda just, hey, we're a neutral third party, you guys let us know what
Yeah.
was really the intent of that addendum. Was the intent that the buyer clearly knew he wasn't ready to settle, and that's why we extended, you know what I mean? So that's where the gray area is gonna be.
Yeah, okay, so we'll pull all the documents. You and Sharon and I will meet about it, this afternoon, and then we'll have
Then
a
after you guys
conversation
talk
if
to
we
Sharon,
need.
just let me know.
Yep.
Let me know, I'm out, I have family in town today, but I'll be back in tomorrow morning, so if you guys wanna call me with Sharon or any other questions you have on it, we'll
How are
attack
you?
it then.
Good.
Okay.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you, Kathy.
Kathy, I have a question.
Sure.
So
Can you catch
I'll,
me back
we'll
up on the
start
meeting?
with Abby.
I mean, we've only going 20 minutes down the street somewhere,
Oh, yeah.
and I'll be right back.
Yeah, we even recording it. So I'll tell them to upload it to you. Upload it to you. John, you're jamming on there. Come on, you gotta be county. Can you make one more appointment?
It would just
10
tie
minutes?
us, then nobody wins.
Oh.
Well, not true, because then I'd have one more help. True. Hey Tracy, want to set an appointment for right now? Tentatively set it for right now? If anything changes, just let me know. Set and help, boom. Holy crap.
How are your guys' brains?
I feel like trash. I don't know, I'm getting like just waves of just nausea.
I'm fine today, but
Last week.
irritating. Are you coming today, Tristan?
If I'm not meeting with Sharon. Oh my gosh, really?
Oh my god, I just knocked that over. The world is going to end. The world is literally ending.
All your ice cream
Right
are
now.
just canceled.
No, even worse. Everyone I know. Oh. The world is actually ending. It was good knowing you guys. It was great while it lasted.
Oh.
So Brandon did, what's his face? Budge at all? Where's his mind at?
he asked me why we're better than Brinkus, and I gave him every reason why we're better than Brinkus.
You sure did.
She was actually there, she heard
I was
it.
like, oh, okay.
I think I did
Here's
pretty
you.
damn good, if I do say so myself.
He stayed on that phone.
Oh no!
What?
Oh,
Let me see. Fuck, dude. Cancel all your appointments.
Dude,
Yeah.
I'm about to. I have to go home and change
Shit.
now.
Put your realtor pin right there.
It's so.
really? You're not changing that, are you?
I'm not. It's just annoying. Like it's like big deal. It's a white shirt. You Keurig. I miss the old coffee machine better. But yeah, so I'm gonna call him again. I told him I'm gonna call him again.
Cool.
I just got aggressive with him. Like, come on, dude.
Yeah, I called him on Saturday
Sorry.
just
Nope,
as a light
it's all right.
touch because I already didn't have his last name in the system, so I figured that'd be a good excuse to just talk to him again.
Yeah.
So.
What is his last name?
Brown.
Brown, huh?
Ooh, Brown. Adrian went on the same appointment too a few months ago.
With Lou?
Yeah.
Yeah, like a long time ago, bro.
I was describing the property to him and he goes, was there like a red car? Like a red
Because I
Chevy
asked if
old
there was
car?
a green Camaro,
Camaro, yeah.
but he didn't have it in his garage.
He sold it. He's
yeah,
been
he was talking
selling
about
shit.
he was trying to sell it when I was there.
Yep.
But when I was there, he had the red Chevy up, so we were like, part of our meeting, we were talking under the car.
He
It was
said he
pretty
wanted
lit.
to talk, you know, you need to think about it, and he's talked to the fucking tooth fairy, to Santa Claus about the decision, whatever.
Talk to
You
you
just
more
wanted to make
today.
sure that the tooth fairy reached out to you.
Yeah. I'm so mad about this.
It's
Is it
you'll
bad? I
be
didn't even see
fine.
it.
It's so not even. Can you spot it?
No. I literally, you moved your finger and I can't even see it. Just a drop from it going into the cup. It's so noticeable. It's like that big.
Ugh, I'm so fucking hungry. I'm gonna die.
I'll call this person and see if they need an open house done.
Patty, why'd you have to hold more appointments than me, huh?
Not hold.
Set?
Where's your calendar?
I sent it to you this morning.
This morning.
Yeah.
What's
This
the
morning.
What's the password for Vulcan Rihanna's account? That's the only reason I didn't change it, because I forgot.
Yeah.
What was the password? Yes, what's the password?
Our team, I think.
Uh-uh.
Well, mine, it just logs in. Like, whatever the thing is, I forget it
I
by
need to figure
the
out,
middle of
because
the week.
if next week happens the same thing, I have to
Okay.
change it.
Sorry.
So let me see what,
Somebody did a study of an air to chip ratio.
Yeah, I know. And
Cheetos.
it's the worst.
Now it's the best.
No,
Oh,
it's the
never
worst.
mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
59% air. I thought
Yeah.
that was chips. Pringles is the best.
I
Or no, it's Fritos.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's one above Pringles.
Okay, it's from top and bottom. Yeah, I'll agree. Fritos be hooking it up.
They do.
Sun chips on
And
the
Pringles,
bread.
obviously.
I love Sun Chips.
Yeah, Sun Chips are fire.
And Pringles. Let's get real.
Yes.
They do a very good job with the bag, with the air to chip ratio, just because of the fact.
It seems
that
like they
it's
would
all the
have
way to the
less
top.
though.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like they would have been at the top. Air to chip ratio. I'm gonna keep this for when I'm chip shopping.
Just never buy Cheetos.
Yeah.
Ever.
Never buy what?
Cheetos.
Why not?
60% air. It's,
So they're only giving you 40% of what you're paying for. Okay, I would be fine with 20% air in the bag, but
yeah. If you get them, that like chili cheese Fritos.
the Philly Bees.
Hey, bro, do you have $1 on you?
Me?
Yeah, like cash.
Like I literally have like 5 perfect amount of dollar bills on me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was planning to use them on lunch. I'm waiting for the meeting is over to go to lunch though, so 10 minutes wasn't long enough.
Why is that water so cloudy?
I don't know.
God.
How do you know?
It's the cloudiest water I've ever seen. This is God making pandas. God. Cow bears. What? Did I fucking stutter? Take a cow and make it a bear.
Okay, let's do this.
Put
Let's do this, let's
razor
do
blades
this,
on
let's do this. Tick tock, we will rock to ya.
Much warmer in here. It's cold, right?
In that room, that
Well,
little
it's-
room.
Yeah, it's freezing.
Freezing in there.
Okay, do we have, agendas?
She's done.
Oh, do we have market reports?
You didn't ask for market reports?
So if they come out, I'd like to always have them for the upcoming team meeting, because they came out last week. Yeah, got it?